This is Mayor Cyril Jefferson, and we are convening a special meeting of the High Point City Council. Here with me in chambers are Councilman Tim Andrew, Councilwoman Amanda Cook, Mayor Pro Tem Michael Holmes, Councilwoman Monica Peters, Councilman Britt Moore, and Councilman Patrick Harmon. We are excited because for the past, I don't know how long, a couple years, I think it's been, not only has this body, not only has our city staff, but also the community at large has been involved in a very public process to draft our 2045 comprehensive plan. I'm excited because I think we've got a full group here with us. Before we actually hear that, we are going to adopt our agenda. I'm going to ask if there's a member of council.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
The motion has been made by Councilman Andrew and seconded by Councilwoman Cook. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion, any against? Sorry, that motion passes. Sorry. Also want to acknowledge that here virtually with us, we have Councilwoman Vicky McKeever. At this time, we're going to acknowledge Heidi Galante, who will bring up the rest of the team for us to talk about this plan. Heidi?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for your time and attention to this very exciting project for the City of High Point. We are here today to bring the working draft to you, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Thomas to present that. They are from our consulting firm, CZB.
Thank you, Heidi. Good morning, council members. Good morning. Thank you for carving out some time for us. We're super excited to be here to present an overview of the draft High Point 2045 Comprehensive Plan. And as the mayor pointed out, this has been a process. We've been at it since January of last year, and we're proud to be at where we are and present you with a draft, actually a working draft. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet. If you have, that's wonderful. We'd love to hear any thoughts or feedback that you have, any questions that you might have. We're here to answer it. But what I thought I would do, especially for those that haven't had a chance to look at it yet, I was going to walk through at a high level through the document, the way it's organized, the components of it, and then that way, when you do have a chance to look at it, you can focus your time on specific things if you so to choose to do that. So we'll just jump right into it here. Let's see if I have this right. I'll just use this down here. Okay. So these will be filled in hopefully within the next few months here. A letter from the mayor and letter from the city manager. First part of the document is pretty straightforward. A lot of acknowledgments. But here at the table of contents, this is where I'll pause and just focus on a couple of things that, I guess I can't use that. The first part, the introduction, is really kind of the background. What is a comprehensive plan? Why we're doing it? The process that we went through and things like that. The second section starts with our vision, and that's where I think is important. You've seen a lot of the components as part of that. I won't spend too much time on that today, but certainly take a look at it. Those are things that we developed early on through the public process. And then when we get into our growth framework section, which is the third section, this is where, again, you've seen some of these components. They're fleshed out a little bit more detail, and then certainly the our way forward are the strategies around the priority focus areas, which I think that will be a good place to focus a lot of your time and energy, because they're things that you probably haven't seen up to this point. So the introduction, as I mentioned, kind of what is a comprehensive plan, the process that we went through. We do have a nice spread in here that talks a little bit about the engagement. The staff did a wonderful job of getting the word out to folks. Everything from handing out business cards with QR codes on them. We've had surveys. We've had 3 rounds of public open houses. Just a lot of really good feedback, and we tried to sprinkle that through the plan so folks can maybe even see some of their own words and their quotes throughout the process, because this has been really a community-driven process. We took a hard look at previous plans and studies. High Point's done a really good job of previous planning work, and we want to make sure that work is not lost, especially the recent work over the last, say, 5 to 7 years or so. So you'll see at the bottom of the page, there's an icon, that blue icon down there. You'll see that sprinkled throughout the document where we reference other planning studies that have already been completed. So we want to make sure that those aren't lost and that there's a lot of really good information in there that we're passing and moving through this document as well. We did some early on analysis of High Point in terms of some of the demographic information. We included some of those that are citywide in this introductory section. You can take a look at those. You might have already seen those. They were part of the early public open houses in early 2023. And then as we get to this one, this really kind of sets up the rest of the document. This spread is the last one in the introduction section, and it's our vision off to the left, and then the Our Growth Framework and Our Way Forward. And you can see that we have 15 strategic initiatives that are organized around those big things or those priority areas, which is cultivate a sense of community and unity, strengthen the sense of place and economic vitality of downtown, and the diversify land use and transportation modes. And we'll get into those a little bit here in a couple minutes. We have a brief glossary of terms for those terms that a lot of people aren't accustomed to seeing. It's hard with a lot of the planning jargon and things like that. To make sure that we try to limit that use in terms of that jargon, but sometimes you just can't avoid it with a planning document. So this first major section of the plan is our vision. It has 3 components: the core values and the planning principles. Again, those were really gleaned out of the public process early on, and then we have the priority areas. That these are the things, the big things that we kept hearing over and over. And really about mid last year, those they started to solidify in terms of what those priority areas were going to be. And then that third section is the preferred growth scenario. So here we have the core values and the planning principles. We're committed to being an inclusive community, an entrepreneurial community, and a creative community. And then off to the right side there, you have the planning principles that are really taking those values a step further, and those are the principles that can be used on a daily basis to evaluate things and decisions. As we get into the priority areas, we have some data centered around each of the priority areas to cultivate a sense of community and unity. Off to the right side of that spread, you'll see what outcomes do we want to achieve. These are the outcomes that the highest ranking outcomes for each of the priorities that were selected through the public process. And you'll see those on each of the 3 spreads for the priority areas. And strengthen the sense of place or sense of economic vitality of downtown. Again, some data, and then also the desired outcomes on the right side. And then the third priority area, diversify land use and transportation modes. Very similar things, just on this one, the desired outcomes are located on the lower right-hand side. And then at the tail end of this this section, the vision section, is the preferred growth scenario. If you, I think we covered this a little bit at one of our other meetings, but we presented 4 growth scenarios to the public through the open house as well as an online survey. 4 different scenarios. The first one is stay the course, continue to do what you've been doing, really don't change much. Pivot slightly on the second one, where you start maybe directing a little bit more of the growth towards some key activity centers. And then, of course, or the third and fourth scenarios were really the majority of the folks supported. 80% selected either number 3 or number 4, where there was a course correction, where we really begin to start redirecting growth to these activity centers that are a little bit more mixed use, higher density, scattered throughout the city of High Point. And then really the major difference between scenario 3 and 4 is 4 does the same thing, except for it takes it a step further with the preservation of open space. And almost 60% of folks supported number 4. So as we move into the third section of the plan, Our Growth Framework, it has 4 components. The first one are these activity centers that were really coming out of that preferred growth scenario, number 3 and number 4. And we'll talk a little bit about those. Place types, which is going to replace the future land use categories, and we'll talk a little bit about those. And then open space preservation, and then the last component is just quality urban design. We introduced this section with a little bit of data and analysis of how we got here, how High Point has changed since as early as 1859, that little square on the left side of the page, all the way over to 2023. And you can see the footprint of High Point and how it's changed over the years. And then as we get into the activity centers and we begin to introduce these are actually higher density mixed use nodes that are, meant to be walkable and bikeable and really used by all forms of all modes of transportation. They're scattered throughout the city, and they fall within 3 categories, and we have 16 of them total. The first category is the regional centers. These are the bigger areas, like, say, the Palladium area. And then it goes down to, we have 2 of those. We go down to the town center level, which we have 5 of, which is that next level down. And that's somewhere between, a 10 to 15 minute walk kind of thing. And then we'll touch on each of these as we get further into the slide deck here. But then we get down to the neighborhood level, and these are really meant to be more compact neighborhood level mixed use areas that really support the local surrounding areas. And then down at the bottom, you'll see that we have 2 street types. These are connecting these corridors, or these corridors are connecting these activity centers throughout the city, and we'll touch on those as well. We have a spread in here that talks a little bit about each of the 16 priority areas, activity centers, and how they came about and why they were selected. And then you'll see in the lower right-hand corner, there's representative examples of each center type. So one for the regional, one for the town, one for the neighborhood. We thought it was important to give a conceptual illustration for what we mean by these activity centers. They're not to be meant as, design solutions. They're meant to be concept level, and we'll show you each one of those here in the next few spreads. So at the regional center level, that really larger level that's around 100 acres or so, probably. This is a regional center that we selected at South Main Street and Fairfield Road. And you'll see that the plaza, which is the Southwood Plaza, is in that existing image right under the rendering. That's what you have there now, and you have the plaza area. You can probably envision that down on South Main Street. The graphic that's above that is just one of 1,000 different concepts that could be developed for this area. And what I think is important to focus on is the components that are included within this graphic. So you'll see the leaders with the information that's pulled off from those. Things like, street trees and shared parking and public gathering spaces and mixed-use buildings. All of those types of things could be organized in a lot of different ways. So we don't want people to get focused on that building is in that location and somebody's going to do it just like this, because there could be lots of different things that drive this. But we wanted to illustrate these concepts for each of these types of centers. And then also you can see in the lower left-hand corner, we have some representative images from other places as well. We also have a representation of the town center. We selected the Southwest Renewal area. I know that the city currently owns a portion of this. We have Grimes Avenue to the south there in the end of the image. Off to the left is Green, off to the right is Oak. It's that wedge. I think some people refer to that one slice down there as the pizza wedge. I think the city has actually acquired that in recent months as well. Again, the town center is one step down from the regional center. It's somewhere between, say, 50 and 100 acres. Again, mixed use, walkable, lots of different types of buildings, housing types mixed in. And again, illustration just to show concept level. And you can see, as we did with the other one, pulling off different components to that are really the important part to emphasize here. And then the third category is the neighborhood center. We selected Skeet Club Road and Johnson Street. You can see that intersection, and then the existing image below it. I know that there's some townhouses being developed on the northwest corner we showed a little bit here in the graphic. And then I know we have a church that is on the southwest corner. But again, this is meant to be 1 to 3 stories, small, compact, serving the local neighborhoods where people hopefully can walk and bike and be able to go to a restaurant, or maybe there's an apartment on the second floor. These are 1 to 3 story type buildings. not meant to be large, big box, intense uses in these neighborhood center areas. Is those two street types that we had mentioned earlier that connect the activity centers. We have two street types, the urban street and the boulevard, and much like the representative examples that I just showed you for the activity centers, these are just representative examples of these two street types. There's a lot of context that has to be taken into consideration when designing streets, as many of you might know. There's right-of-way width, there's traffic volumes, there's traffic signals, all of those types of things. But what we wanted to do is outline the components that are important to consider on these street types. Things like, whether there's a median or not, whether it's planted or not, whether there's on-street parking, whether there's bike space, either on-street or off-street, whether it's protected or unprotected, whether there's a planting zone or pedestrian zone, what that could be. These could be designed in a bunch of different ways, but we wanted to emphasize that these are the components that should be considered. You can imagine that there's certain places where bike lanes just aren't going to work, or that on-street parking may not make sense, or you may have a sidewalk that has a tree lawn with only a 5-foot sidewalk on the other side, and there may be houses that are set back from the street, or there may be even commercial buildings that are set back from the street. So there's a lot of different ways that these can be designed, but the important thing here, I think, at the comp plan level is to focus on the different components that should be considered when looking at these. And as we move into the second component of the growth framework are the place types. So in addition to the activity centers, we introduced these 11 place types, and these are similar to future land uses, but they go a little bit above and beyond land use and start thinking about form and character in addition to land use. So that way, people can begin to visualize a place and what it could be, and not just the use of the land that's in that place. We have some representative examples, images for each of the place types. We have what we call a figure ground, which is actually a figure ground map there that you can see the buildings in the street network. They're actually from High Point in different places in High Point that this fabric already exists. And then underneath, you'll have a brief description, the primary uses, the secondary uses, and then also some transportation and infrastructure characteristics that are likely to be included in these types of places. So we have a suburban edge rule. This is kind of starting way out at the city's edge. And as we move in, we have the suburban neighborhood, we have urban neighborhood, we have mixed employment centers, which are some of those light industrial areas, office parks, places like that. We have transitional industrial areas. These are older, maybe old industrial buildings that are going to be repurposed. Maybe they're transitioning from what they used to be in terms of industrial, but maybe into more flex space. They could be flats, they could be live-work units. They could be a place where you maybe have a brewery in the back where it's actually making the beer, brewing the beer, and up front, that's where they're selling it. Or they're making a widget in the back and they have a retail store up front and they're selling their widgets. So these kind of flex space, and we can think of areas, especially south of downtown, that maybe some of these older industrial areas that are beginning to transition. We also have the general industrial, campus institutional, parks and green space, downtown, of course, and then mixed-use corridors, and then suburban corridor. You'll see on the right-hand side, we have a placeholder for the map that will actually go in there when the map is still under development. Staff and the consultant team are working closely on that, and then when that's available, we'll make sure that we send that to you for your review as well. But all 11 of those place types, in addition to the activity centers, will be laid down throughout High Point, and you'll be able to see those on the map that will be forthcoming. We also have the last section, actually the third component of the growth framework is open space preservation. One of the things we did early on is soon after we found that people were selecting really the fourth growth scenario, which included the preservation open space. We tested a little bit of what people thought about how to actually preserve some open space. And so we included that in a survey, and we found that most people actually supported funding to actually buy open space and preserve open space. There's a lot of different tools in the toolbox to do that, and we outlined some of those tools on this spread, and they include either fall under a couple different categories. The planning side of it, and then the regulation side of it, and then the acquisition side of it. So there's lots of different tools that are available. We got some good feedback this week as well from folks in meetings about different ways to actually do this, possibly a fund that could be set up, things like that. And then the fourth component of our growth framework is just good design that's fundamental to placemaking, and placemaking adds value, and we want to make sure that as the code is updated following the comprehensive plan, because that's what is the next step that should happen to make sure that the code is consistent with the plan, is that we consider the different components that are on the private side, but then also on the public side, because it's really the public realm and the private realm working together that really interface to create great streets and great public space. So we wanted to emphasize that, and we dedicated a spread to talking about just good quality urban design. Okay, so now we're down to the last section. Again, like I said, probably a lot of those things that I just went over, you've kind of maybe seen before, either at the open houses or in one of our previous presentations. But this section is fairly new. It's called Our Way Forward. This spread, I think, is really indicative of what this section is all about. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that graphic there. We're recommending an implementation task force be put together following the adoption of the plan. This will actually help keep the comprehensive plan in the forefront of everybody's mind. And it's not just City Hall's responsibility to move this vision forward. It's everybody's responsibility. And it's going to take a concerted effort by city departments, you folks on council, the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as other key stakeholders in the community. So we want to make sure that all of those folks are brought to the table and everybody's working together and rowing in the same direction to move the vision for the comprehensive plan and the vision for High Point forward. On the right side of the screen, you'll see strategic initiatives. We have 15 strategic initiatives, 5 under each of the priority areas. And then what we'll do is we'll just kind of walk through these real quickly. This is where, if you haven't taken a look at the comprehensive plan, certainly take a hard look at these areas. We're meeting with city departments this week. We met with staff yesterday to get feedback on some of these things. We want to make sure that we're on the right track, and that if we need to add or modify things, we can certainly do that over the next few weeks. But create an incentive package for the redevelopment or development of all the identified activity centers. Some of these activity centers are really just going to happen on their own through the market once they're zoned, and you have the code in place to allow that to happen. Some are going to take a little bit more of a concerted effort and maybe take some incentives to be able to get those there. Properly fund community development and housing, certainly to be able to do some of the programs that is necessary. It's certainly going to take time and resources and money to be able to do that. So we wanted to make sure that we got that in there, and we actually have timelines and things like that that are associated with each of these strategic initiatives at the end of this section. Create a community investment fund or umbrella fund to ensure equal funding allocation annually to each council ward. The revitalization of Washington Street as a catalyst neighborhood center. There's a lot of energy on Washington Street right now. We've met with those folks a couple of times. It's exciting to see this area being revitalized, and we think that there's build on that energy and continue the revitalization of Washington Street. We did a little graphic there that's similar. Again, the components are the most important, but the idea is to make sure that we get good quality design that is important in placemaking and add value, meaningful value to this important neighborhood. Collaborate with partners to revitalize the Southwest area. And then as we move into strengthen the sense of place and the economic vitality of downtown, we have 5 strategic initiatives here. There's a lot of energy around the Stadium District, a lot of time, resources, and investments have been put into that area. We think that's the area to double down on, is to continue to build that energy, to leverage those assets, and really develop downtown from the inside out. We think there's a great opportunity to develop this area that can actually coexist with the market and create a really vibrant downtown. Getting more people living and working downtown is going to be really important, and this area, I think, is certainly ripe for doing that. incentivize the development of housing downtown, develop a master streetscape plan for the incremental improvements of downtown streets, and also make stronger connections to adjacent neighborhoods, continue to collaborate with Downtown High Point, the Market Authority, and other key downtown stakeholders, and also coordinate the branding effort for downtown in alignment with recommendations in the Downtown High Point Strategic Plan, which has already started some of that branding. And the last, or the third priority area, diversified land use and transportation modes. So update the ordinance is really probably one of the first steps following the comprehensive plan, is to update the code to make sure that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, and especially the place types and the activity centers. Initiate a multifaceted approach to diversify housing throughout the city. We understand that the city is going to be doing a citywide housing strategy, which is great. That's probably much needed, and I think that will go a long way identifying opportunities to help move this one forward. Ensure the alternative modes of transportation are included in every street and roadway project. I know the city has a complete streets policy, but maybe working with NCDOT and other stakeholders to make sure that that complete streets policy is considered and that all modes of transportation are included in all projects. And then develop a comprehensive sidewalk installation and replacement program. One of the first things we heard early on at the community open houses is how important walkability is for everyone throughout High Point, north and south, and sidewalks play an important role in that. So making sure that people have the ability to not only walk for recreation, but also there's folks that need sidewalks to be able to walk for transportation as well. And then the fifth and final strategic initiative is to develop a green belt program. We're going to be meeting with the counties here in another week or so to get their feedback on this. We understand that the county is an important player in this, and we recognize that, and I'm certainly going to be working with them as we begin to make changes to the draft document. The final couple of spreads here, we have a spread on how should the city address consistency in terms of future rezoning requests. We have a 5-step process that you see there on the right side of the screen. Also, that graphic that you see on the far right-hand side of the screen is translating the existing zoning districts to how they might line up with the place type. Now, of course, this will be addressed further through a diagnostic and a code assessment as part of the code update, but this kind of provides that initial step, recognizing that you may need more or revised or fewer zoning districts to be able to address these different place types. And then at the end, we have an implementation timeline for each of the priority areas for all 15 of the strategic initiatives that includes the following categories: who should take the lead, who should be involved, what's the time frame, and how will we measure our success. Again, we're working closely with the departments and the city staff and other stakeholders to make sure that we get feedback on these, to make these as far-reaching and but realistic as possible. So with that, I'd love to open it up to answer any questions. We'll welcome any feedback. And again, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do, and we hope that you send our comments our way within the next couple of weeks. That'd be great.
Thank you so much. At this time, if there's any members of council who have any questions or general thoughts to share.
General thoughts, I thought the presentation was very well put together. I need more time to assess it, but
Sure.
Great job so far. I think the vision that we're putting together is something that we can get a lot of buy-in from our constituents once we finalize this, and then have more town halls and stuff like that to get more input. I'm not convinced that everybody, a lot of people have put input into it so far, but there's always well, I didn't know anything about it. And
Yeah.
I want to try to squash that as much as possible, but
Sure.
I like what I'm seeing so far. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the more penetration we can get into our community in terms of explaining what the 2045 plan is and the components of it, I think the better and the more buy-in. I think it's a pretty well crafted plan. If you could go back about, I think it's about 3 or 4 slides, there was some public, right there, thank you. I think this bottom comment here, I think we should focus on improving our existing main areas like downtown and less about expanding outwards. We have a lot of opportunity to create a cutting-edge, unique, and fashionable city. I think that comment speaks to the overall vision of strategically what we were trying to accomplish. And I think that sentiment being reflected from the public is in line with the overall goal of the city. And I think that I was heartened to see that, because I think what we're seeing out of this comment is that folks have been waiting for High Point to kind of catch up to the other municipalities around us, and I think there's an appetite for it. And so, if we put together this well-crafted plan, and we have the appetite in the city like this, I think we'll get that significant buy-in. And I think some of the things that may be a little bit more controversial down the road, like maybe some type of fund balance for purchasing existing space, I think that will land a little softer if that's something that we take on. But I agree with Councilman Andrew that there's going to need to be some broad education on what the 2045 plan offers and what it is and how everyone factors in to its execution.
If I may, one thing I forgot to mention, from my input, there's still a desire to have High Point be somewhat of a small town. Well, maybe not small town, but not too big. So I think that this balances out. I mean, obviously, we're growing. We can't avoid it. But to maintain green space and walkability would kind of balance the desire to be unique and small, but still grow.
Great, yeah. I think that's definitely part of the vision and stuff that we've heard from residents as well.
Thank you both.
I had 2 questions, kind of going off of what Councilmember Holmes mentioned. So one question that's come up is, what do we do with all the old buildings that are here? And I didn't specifically see anything that kind of addresses if it's going to be too expensive for developers to, do something new within the existing building. Is there something that's been discussed as far as returning that to green space and what the city would have to do to mitigate any environmental concerns or anything like that so that we reduce the amount of blight in those buildings?
Yeah, are you specifically talking about some of the older industrial areas and things like that? Yeah, that was one of the things, one of the reasons why we introduced the place type of transitional industrial is the repurposing and revitalization of a lot of these older buildings. And, providing flexibility in that district for those buildings, I think is going to be really important. And also the reality of it is it may take some incentives, because a lot of those buildings, they're not, I mean, they're still viable as buildings, but they maybe need to be retrofitted for modern day uses and things like that. So I think providing the flexibility and also incentivizing to try to get investors to roll the dice on some of those. And I think as some redevelopment happens, the momentum picks up, values go up, the return on investment can go up because they can get more for their space and things like that. So, yeah, I think that's a tricky area, but I think at least from what I've experienced thus far in some of those areas, in our tour of those areas, they look like there could be viable buildings. They just need to be repurposed.
Yeah, I think there's also, if we look around the country, there's been a move to innovate those old buildings in different fashions, right? In terms of residential, mixed use. Some of those plans have been adopted around the country. I think in terms of how we solve some of our housing problems, how we solve some of our broader issues, if there's incentives based to be able to retrofit those buildings in those fashions, I think there's an opportunity there for us as well. So yeah, so I think to Councilmember point, I think this is something that we should absolutely focus on, because there could be cost savings there.
Yeah.
In terms of reclaiming land for green space, or there could be cost savings there in terms of how we incentivize housing and complete our housing stock. So there's opportunity for some of these older buildings. I think obviously some of the environmental things will come into play, but if we can reclaim that space or retrofit that space, I think there's opportunity for us in terms of cost savings and innovation.
Agreed, yeah.
I just have one other question, because I know with the little icon of the document where it was referencing
Previous plans, yep.
With the recently passed One High Point Commission and how some of these overlap, I do think that in talking to the public, there are groups that would really like to see where those overlaps happen specifically with the One High Point Commission, since that's the most recent thing that council has kind of passed to address a lot of similar issues that are in this plan. So I just didn't know if there was any way to highlight that maybe in a different way to,
Make it even more prominent, yeah.
I think so, to just maybe address some of the groups that have been marginalized or neglected in the past.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Yeah, and I know especially in this section, I think the One High Point report, we took a really hard look at it. And, yeah, but we'll definitely see if there's a way, at least especially graphically, that we can punch that up a little bit.
Can we recognize Councilwoman Peters?
Thank you. So great work, guys.
Thank you.
It's so exciting to see all that energy and all the ideas, and it's just amazing to watch. And I had taken some notes. I had not ever noticed or heard the term transitional industrial district, but that's the district I love the most. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to see that a lot of those old mill buildings that look empty from the outside have already been repurposed inside. And now they've got plans on the exterior to really change. And I think that what council has done, and us getting that raise grant, the $19.8 million, and that phase one that's going to go through those industrial corridor is really going to help. Because some of those folks that have invested in those are from all over the world, from Holland, from Turkey, so we're really touching on that global city and art and design. So spot on, guys. It was really good.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate that.
I got a question. So updating the development ordinance apparently is going to take a couple of years. So how, as things have come before planning and zoning that are not in line with the plan that was adopted, but the development ordinance hasn't been changed, how is that navigated? If something fits the current development ordinance, but after 2027 it wouldn't, and then you can get, I guess, things that are happening that sort of go against the goals of the 2045 plan because they fit in the current zoning. So how is that navigated?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there's a couple different ways that's typically handled. First and foremost, the code is the code. So even though you have the adopted comprehensive plan at that point, it's a policy document.
Right.
So the zoning, it's required that the zoning be based on the comprehensive plan, but the zoning code would still, that's the law, that's the regulations for development. As you begin to update it, there's a couple different ways you could handle it. There's some communities that decide, okay, as we are updating the code, the old code is still in effect, but at some point, the new code comes into effect. You can either replace the old code. There's some communities that provide a flexibility over maybe the first 6 months or something like that, that you can actually, you're using both codes. So sometimes you can actually, have developers or applicants kind of pick which one they want to function under, but then it's at some dedicated time, the old code goes away and the new code comes into place.
Yeah.
Any other questions from council? I do have one thought.
Please.
I received a phone call, someone who spoke about housing, and I know you all mentioned in all of your big ideas within the strategic initiatives underneath them, housing's mentioned, but the person who called made a pretty emphatic point about housing being mentioned in the title of one of the big ideas. I think their point was that housing is such a prevalent issue that I think weaves into all of this. That is there not some way to make it very known in those big titles about housing? And I don't know right now that I feel one way or another, but I do think the point's a poignant one.
Yeah.
What are you all's thoughts on that?
Yeah, we considered that. One of the things that with that particular, let me jump to it here, that particular priority area, It's this one right here. Diversify land use and transportation modes. It's because there's a lot under this umbrella of this priority area that goes beyond just housing. Housing is a component, it's a land use that is a really important component throughout the city, especially right now. I think we're facing, housing it's a critical time for housing across the country, and there's a lot of factors in that, one of them being interest rates and things like that, that we'll begin to see things right-size over the next couple of years. Housing is definitely important. The only reason why we didn't change land use to housing is because there are other things within that priority area, other land uses that are also addressed, not just housing. So one of the things we did as a result of that is we introduced number 2 as a separate initiative, strategic initiative, underneath land use and transportation modes, and it's initiate a multifaceted approach to diversify housing throughout the city. And so that's the way we felt was the best way to address that, just because, like I said, there was other things within this priority area beyond housing that deals with land use. So I think we wouldn't necessarily be opposed if people felt strongly like, geez, we need to change the title. But we thought that it was adequately addressed with this particular strategic initiative.
Any other questions from council? The comments made about how we've done such a great job to really be inclusive of engagement and getting input, I think it's been said, but it probably can't be overstated. We appreciate that. I think to that end, if we're going to activate a task force, many of the folks who have been involved thus far will probably need either them or someone else from their respective organizations represented. Have we received any feedback from any of those individuals to say, hey, we'd be willing to participate in that task force?
We haven't started that process yet.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
No other questions. Heidi, we'll pass it back to you.
I just want to close with our next step is to have a public meeting on February 20th over at Cogden Yards in the factory building in the engine room on the 3rd floor at 5:30 p.m. That is going to be the public reveal of the draft. We'll do a presentation, question and answer, and then we'll have a little celebratory reception following that meeting. So we hope that you and all of the public can come and attend that.
Heidi, is that the only one that's planned? Because I know that's kind of central to downtown, but.
It is just the public reveal, and then that is going to open public comment period, and we have an online portal that everybody can go into and give us their feedback on the draft, and that is all going to be funneled into a database so we can get everybody's comments and make sure that they come in. But we are always open to going and giving presentation to neighborhood groups, civic groups, whoever, we'll have a little road show that we can go and give, and happy to do that.
Well, the reason I ask is because, I think if we want to collect as much feedback from that initial meeting as we can, public reveal, so we just need to make sure that folks are aware of how to communicate at that specific event. And so, if we don't get the level of feedback that we hope for, then potentially later on we can do some road shows and
Yes.
for reveal. But if we can get pretty representative sample of the city in this one, I think we just wanted to make sure that we put priority on getting that notice
Yes.
to the public to
Yes.
participate in.
And then would this be something that can come to council in March? Is that what
So,
that is?
so that just is the public opening of public comment on the public review draft. After we get all the public comment, we'll make changes, we'll convert that into the public hearing draft, and that's going to come through the public hearing process. Tentatively, we're looking at end of March for a Planning and Zoning Commission, and then it would be May for City Council because of furniture market and not having a meeting in that second meeting in April. That's the tentative schedule at this point.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
At this time, council is going to go into closed session for purposes of attorney-client privilege. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So move.
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Andrew. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against? The ayes have it, and that motion Will you let us know when we're public? All good to go? Council has come out of our closed session, and we have one more agenda item. It's consideration of agreements with Elliott Sidewalk Communities, High Point LLC. I'll go ahead and make a motion for city council to request, I'll make a motion for city council to approve the settlement agreement and mutual release and adopt a budget ordinance amendment and authorize the city manager to negotiate any minor non-substantive changes. Is there a second on that motion?
Second?
It's a second made by Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion on this motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it, and that motion passes. Can we also have a motion to adjourn the special meeting? Motion made by Councilwoman Peters, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Holmes. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it, and we are now adjourned.